Losing a loved one takes a devastating toll on the mind. To escape, you might thrust yourself into work, old friends, or anything else that can keep your mind off of it. But if you're Sylvester Yarrow, you find yourself thrust into the middle of a plot involving the Jedi, the Nile, and the mysterious hyperspace prospectors. Oh, and your ex-girlfriend, the one with the adorable lightning cat, she's there too. Out of the Shadows by Justina Ireland presents a High Republic story unlike any we've seen before. Ireland assembles a wonderfully relatable cast of characters working through a myriad of issues including friendship, love, and the Force itself, ensuring that the Star Wars High Republic continues its strong momentum through the end of the second wave. Hi everyone, I'm Nathan Emery, content creator here at Youtini, and I'll be your guide to Justina Ireland's Out of the Shadows. As with all of our Youtini reviews, this review is compiled by our expert team of reviewers who read the book, give our thoughts, and all compile our final review. It'll be mostly spoiler free, so if you're okay with a few spoilers about the overall plot and the characters involved, keep watching this review to get our thoughts on this book. But if you're looking to jump in without any prior knowledge, maybe avoid this review until you've read it. With that said, these are just the opinions of some people who love the Star Wars expanded universe, so if you have different thoughts on the book or you want to engage in this conversation at all, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments down below. With that said, let's jump into the plot. So in a similar vein to its young adult predecessor, Into the Dark by Claudia Gray, Out of the Shadows starts admittedly slow. It introduces us to the cast of characters first, Sylvester Yarrow, Vernestra Rwoh, Reath Silas, all of whom we're pretty familiar with through the Star Wars High Republic. And in a plot that kind of takes a few rereads to really understand all of the intricacies, they find themselves in the service of the wealthy Graf family. There's a bunch of political intrigue and power plays that confuse even the Jedi Knights in this story. The Grafs are a family that have competed with the San Tekos in the hyperspace prospecting business. And of course, that process has made them extremely wealthy and also extremely curious about new technologies. So the main plot of the book is that the Grafs are just looking to use an abandoned part of space for experiments. Pretty simple, right? But now, it wouldn't be Star Wars without a little more intrigue, would it? And that's primarily where Out of the Shadows builds its story, is through intrigue. Of course, there is some of that trademark action that we've come to love from the High Republic era, but that takes place mostly in the last quarter of the book. And once you get to that point, it's nearly impossible to put down. But if that's what you're looking for going in, it might be a little bit jarring to focus on character development and plot development rather than action. So ultimately, the plot of this book serves as a vehicle for character development and for some of the most complex and rich character development we've seen in this era. So although this book might not hook you with the action the same way some of the other High Republic releases do, the impact on the characters will definitely continue through iterations to come.
So that's why we give the plot an 8.1 out of 10.
Now let's move on to characters. I mentioned that Out of the Shadows includes a lot of familiar faces, Reath Silas, Vernestra Rwoh, but the main character of this book is actually a new face. And introducing a new character as the main character in a book that's entirely focused on character development is kind of a risk. Fortunately, Sylvester Yarrow is more than up to the challenge. Syl's presence as kind of an outsider both to the Jedi and to the Graf San Tekka conflict give her a wonderfully unique perspective that's actually really helpful to us as an audience. The way she learns about the conflict, the political intrigue, the way she processes those things is remarkably similar to how we would as outsiders to this conflict, and it's a really incredibly effective storytelling device. So aside from Syl's function as a really great vessel for the audience to understand the story, she's also a vessel for two of the most important relationships in this book. Now, one of those relationships we won't dive into just for spoiler reasons, but the other relationship is with Jordana Sparkburn. Syl's relationship with Jordana is significant not only for its literary power as it draws you in and really makes you emotionally sort of feel the tension between the characters and for this emotional development, but also for what it represents. Syl is an LGBTQ+ woman of color involved in a relationship with another woman, and that relationship is front and center in a Star Wars book. And not only a Star Wars book, but a main series Star Wars book in one of the most important eras in Star Wars. Now, with the way the Star Wars publishing universe is going, that fact won't be very notable someday, but right now it's a really important step in the right direction. So despite the fact that Jordana and Sil aren't actually in a relationship, we do get some of the sweetest writing in Star Wars since Lost Stars. Ireland really excels both at highlighting the spark that still exists between these two characters despite the fact that their relationship didn't work out, as well as really showing us some of those quiet moments of love and connection between the characters. Those are some of the highlights of the book. Among the other standouts of the book is Vernestra Don't Call Me Vern Rowe. Ever since her introduction in Justina Ireland's A Test of Courage, Vernestra has been a fan favorite, especially among our Discord members. And if you're looking to hop into the Discord banter about the High Republic, Out of the Shadows, or just anything Star Wars, be sure to head on over to our Discord community at youtini.com/discord. We'd love to have you. But with her role in Out of the Shadows and the way her character and her story continues to be told, I don't see her role as a fan favorite changing anytime soon. So to fully list the remaining characters in this project would necessitate a much longer review, and to talk about their stories would make an even longer review, but we would be remiss if we didn't highlight a few of the standouts, like Master Comic Vitus, Reath Silas, and the cunning Xylan Graf. So Reath and Comac's relationship, which was introduced in Into the Dark, appropriately levels up with Out of the Shadows, and it's definitely a treat to see. On the other hand, Xylan Graf is an agent of chaos in this book, but he's also a really helpful device in understanding the Graf Santeca conflict. The fact that his side of the conflict is shown so prominently means there's a lot of exposition about this conflict, and we really understand what's going on with the hyperspace lines by the end of this book, in large part due to Xylan Graf. It's come to pass that for a lot of young adult Star Wars novels, characters tend to be the standout. We've seen it with novels like Lost Stars, Into the Dark, and now Out of the Shadows. So whereas the plot might be a little tricky to follow at times, and it might slip through the cracks in terms of holding your attention, the character development more than makes up for it. Just as we've come to expect from so many Star Wars young adult books, characters are really the standout of Out of the Shadows.
The strength of the characters is why our score in that category is an 8.6.
Now let's move on to originality. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a look behind the curtain with our review process here when I say that originality is actually a really difficult part of reviewing all of these new High Republic books. Usually when we evaluate new Star Wars books, we have a better grasp on originality because they're a completely new story that's told. But in this case, each book borrows something from the others. It takes from the previous young adult novels, middle grade novels, adult novels, comics. They're all this amalgamation of characters, and so originality on that sense would be difficult. Sure, we could compare how many new bits of information are introduced or how many new characters there are, but that would be a futile exercise. So instead, we're going to focus on the new bits of lore and story that are presented in Out of the Shadows. And Out of the Shadows is actually quite heavy on that, in large part thanks to the Graf Santeca family conflict. So we've gotten a little more familiar with the hyperspace economy and the conflict surrounding it, and just the intricacies involving hyperspace overall throughout the past High Republic releases. Instead of just being a simple way to get from point A to point B, we were introduced to the Santeca family, who were able to get rich off of hyperspace prospecting, and of course the Nile, who are able to use hyperspace in really mysterious ways through their paths. Out of the Shadows goes above and beyond, really giving us a look into this conflict. We see exactly how profitable hyperspace prospecting is, and we understand that it's a force that can really allow you to control a lot of the galaxy. It's a source of a lot of power because it's the only way to expand rule in the galaxy to get to the outer rim. Hyperspace involves a lot of power. And as we're introduced to this conflict between the Graf family and the Santeca family, which we understand is now a generational conflict, we also see that this conflict is definitely going to cause a lot of squabbles and skirmishes down the line. We're also introduced to other really important pieces of lore, such as the idea of hyperspace-linked visions for Jedi. These hyperspace visions harken back to the second sight of the Chiss from Timothy Zahn's Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy. But what's different about these is that Force visions always have been kind of unreliable. They show us a version of the future, but not necessarily what will happen, just what could happen. They're historically unreliable, and so when you add in hyperspace as another element to these visions, that adds to sort of the unpredictability and the need to really lean on the Force to understand what's actually going on.
So even though this book uses a lot of familiar faces, our score for originality with all of these new plot points announced is an 8.5 out of 10.
Now let's move on to writing. Justina Ireland made her Star Wars writing debut with several middle grade novels, including of course A Test of Courage, as well as Lando's Luck and Spark of the Resistance. But outside of Star Wars, she's written a ton of novels for all different age ranges, so it's no surprise that she was able to jump into the world of Star Wars young adult writing and really knock it out of the park. As we mentioned, where Ireland really excels is characters. Now, Star Wars features a ton of characters, and it can be hard to keep them straight, especially when new characters are introduced continually throughout a book and you're trying to remember who they are, why they're important, and differentiate between the different voices. But Ireland manages to keep all of the characters' voices distinct, and that's where she really excels. We never once skip a beat in terms of knowing who a character is, knowing how they're going to react, or just really getting to see their personality. Ireland makes that show throughout all of the pages of this book. And of course, relationships are difficult to write. Both romantic relationships, friendships, relationships between Jedi Masters and Padawans are all difficult to write, and Ireland excels at really crafting meaningful relationships, getting us emotionally invested in the characters and in their relationships, and just understanding all of these interpersonal conflicts, which relate often to our own personal conflicts. On the other hand, Ireland's ability to deliver an action-packed punch at the end of the book cannot be understated. The final 150 pages of the book are really one of those late-night binges that'll have your heart racing, keep you on the edge of your seat, unable to put the book down. Ireland pulls no punches in the finale, and the result is some of the best action we've seen in the High Republic so far.
We loved this book's writing, which is why we gave it an 8.8 out of 10.
Now on to entertainment. From an entertainment perspective, Out of the Shadows could not be more different from, say, The Rising Storm, the excitement of the Republic Fair on Valo, Jedi riding dragons, all of the crazy action that happens in The Rising Storm. So when you go into this book, go in looking for something different. It's not going to be the crazy action, the Jedi swinging their lightsabers around, all of the explosions and chaos we're used to from the past month of releases in the High Republic. This book is softer, it's gentler, it presents its entertainment in a very different way, and that's through relationships, through character building, through those slow burns that kind of build up throughout the whole book. Not every chapter is going to end with a bang or some crazy cliffhanger, but that's okay, that's still entertainment, it's just a very different speed. So as you sit down to crack open Out of the Shadows, the last book of this wave of the High Republic, as you look ahead to Wave 3, anticipate what the plot might be, try to clear your head of expectations. Instead of going in expecting this to be an action-packed finale to the wave, go in expecting for something softer, for something slower, but something just as meaningful, something focused on character development and relationship building, rather than crazy speeder chases and space battles.
So ultimately, our entertainment score is an 8.1 out of 10.
So to wrap up, in Out of the Shadows, Justina Ireland creates a beautiful story of relationship building, of secret discovering, and of character development. It's one that shows us new lore of Star Wars, introduces us to new characters, and develops characters we're already familiar with. It's an admirable finish to this wave of the High Republic.
So our final review score for Out of the Shadows by Justina Ireland is an 8.4 out of 10.
So not only is Out of the Shadows kind of a welcome respite from the heartbreak of The Rising Storm, but it's also a necessary story to be told in the galaxy. There are always going to be those characters who are left behind, who are forgotten in the events of the greater galaxy. The characters who are left behind by the Jedi in search of the greater good, and those characters can't be forgotten. Because those stories are worthy to be told. There are hyperspace prospectors looking to make a profit. There are teenagers shouldering bigger responsibilities than they should ever have to bear. And there are lovers who are trying to find their way back to each other even when it seems like the entire universe is trying to keep them apart. And as long as those stories are being told, well, we really are all the Republic. Thanks for watching. That concludes the review, but if you haven't picked up your copy of Out of the Shadows yet, stick around for this. So Youtini has partnered with Audible to bring you your first Star Wars audiobook completely free. That's right, all you have to do is head on over to youtini.com/audible and sign up there, and you'll get your first Star Wars audiobook completely free. And I, along with the rest of the team at Youtini, can attest that the quality of Star Wars audiobooks has been incredible, and Out of the Shadows is sure to be no different. So if you're looking to jump into Star Wars audiobooks for the first time, or you have in the past but you haven't recently, definitely pick up Out of the Shadows on Audible with that free trial. And links to everything I've mentioned, including our Discord community, the Audible trial, and of course Out of the Shadows itself, will be found down in the description below. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.